For 20 years, I believed I knew my wife better than anyone. Marissa had been my constant, my compass, the reason our home in Maple Ridge felt alive. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was steady, the kind of love built through late-night talks, shared routines, and unspoken understanding. I was an analyst by trade, a man of patterns and predictability, and Marissa fit into the rhythm of my life like the final piece of a puzzle. Every morning was the same. She brewed her vanilla coffee while humming a tune from the radio. I read the market reports over toast, and the girls, Grace and Haley, would rush down the stairs with mismatched socks and laughter that filled the kitchen. It was an ordinary kind of happiness, and I had no reason to question it. Not until that weekend trip. It started when Marissa told me her sisters, Elena and Paige, had planned a family retreat near Lake Superior. A long weekend away, she said, to recharge and reconnect. I thought nothing of it. She deserved it. She'd been working late with her event planning business, juggling clients, deadlines, and household chaos. When she hugged me goodbye on that Friday morning, her perfume lingered longer than usual. She looked radiant, almost glowing. I remember thinking, God, she still takes my breath away. But when she returned Sunday evening, something about her had shifted, a faint crack in the familiar rhythm. She hugged the girls, smiled at me, and asked if I'd eaten. Her voice was calm, her tone normal, yet distant, like she was acting out her part in a play. Her eyes avoided mine longer than they used to. I told myself I was imagining things. People change after time away. Maybe she just needed space. The following weeks, the pattern grew stranger. Her phone, once left on the kitchen counter without a second thought, became an extension of her hand. She started locking it, taking it with her even to the bathroom. Every Friday evening, she had client meetings. Sometimes, I'd hear her laughter echo from the porch as she took calls after dinner. I tried to stay rational. I wanted to believe her. But doubt is like a slow leak. Once it starts, it never stops. One night, while she was in the shower, her phone lit up on the counter. I didn't plan to look. I never wanted to be that man. But when I saw the preview, a message from someone saved as E, reading same time this week, my chest tightened. Elena? It didn't make sense. My mind refused to go further, but my gut already knew something wasn't right. That's when I met Cole Barrett. A colleague had mentioned him, a private investigator, ex-Minneapolis PD, known for being discreet and thorough. It took me a full week to dial his number. I remember sitting in my car in the parking lot of my office, gripping my phone like it was made of glass. When he answered, his voice was calm, professional. Mr. Mason, tell me what you've seen. It felt wrong, even saying it aloud, describing the little things, the guarded phone, the late nights, the sudden secrecy. Cole didn't interrupt. When I was done, he said quietly, "You did the right thing calling me. I'll find the truth, one way or another." The waiting was the hardest part. For days, I moved through my life like a ghost. The numbers on my spreadsheets blurred together. The conversations at work became noise. Marissa's laughter, once comforting, now sounded like an echo of something false. She wore new perfume, dressed differently, and her eyes had a spark I didn't recognize, a spark not meant for me. Then, one Thursday evening, Cole called. His tone was clipped, steady. "We have something. I'll send you the files tonight, but I think you'll want to see this in person." When I arrived at his office, the lights were low, the air heavy with cigarette smoke. Cole slid a folder across the desk, photos, timestamps, and audio transcriptions. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. There she was, Marissa, at the Birchwood Hotel. But she wasn't alone. I recognized Elena and Paige. Each arrived separately, within minutes of one another. Each met with a different man. Cole played the audio. Laughter filled the room, familiar voices mocking their husbands, calling their secret meetings the Friday Club. I heard Marissa's voice clearly, saying, "They'll never suspect. It's just our little game." The words cut deeper than any blade could. I sat there, silent, listening to the sound of my wife betraying 20 years of trust. When I finally looked up, Cole asked softly, "What do you want to do, James?" I didn't answer. Not then. My throat was too tight to form words. But inside, I knew this wasn't going to be another quiet wound I'd bury under work and routine. "No," This time, the truth deserved to be seen. That night, I drove home through the empty streets of Maple Ridge, the snow falling in thin, glowing sheets under the streetlights. Our house looked warm and peaceful from the outside, the kind of home people envy. But to me, it had already turned into a stranger's place. I stood at the doorway, watching Marissa asleep on the couch, the TV flickering across her face. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I whispered to myself, "You wanted the truth, James. Now you have it." And as I turned off the lights and walked upstairs, one thought anchored itself in my mind. This wasn't the end. Not yet. In the days that followed, I carried the truth like a burning coal in my chest. Every smile I gave, every polite nod, every conversation with Marissa was an act of restraint. I'd seen the photos, heard the recordings, memorized every detail of her deceit. But I couldn't confront her yet. I needed the right moment. Not for vengeance, but for clarity. Marissa kept playing her role, cheerful and radiant. She made pancakes for the girls on Sunday, laughed too loud at the dinner table, and kissed my cheek before bed like nothing was wrong. Sometimes I wondered if she even noticed how cold my lips had become. But I noticed everything. The faint scent of cologne that wasn't mine, the new lingerie tucked beneath her folded clothes, the look of relief when I said I'd be working late. Cole had done his job. Now it was my turn. I spent a week planning the dinner. I invited everyone, Marissa's sisters, Elena and Paige, their husbands, my in-laws, and our 2 daughters. The invitation read, Family Appreciation Night. Marissa's eyes glowed when she saw it. "That's so sweet of you, James. You've been so distant lately." I thought something was wrong. "Nothing's wrong," I said quietly. "It's time we all had dinner together again." On Friday evening, the house filled with the scent of roasted lamb and wine. I wore a navy suit, the same one from our 20th anniversary. Marissa wore a red dress I hadn't seen before. "Do I look all right?" she asked, twirling slightly. "You look perfect," I replied, and I meant it in a strange, detached way. It was the calm before the storm. By 7, everyone had arrived. The dining room glowed with soft light, the table set with crystal glasses and candles. Laughter filled the air as conversations bloomed. It was the kind of scene that belonged on a magazine cover, the perfect family. But perfection has a fragile sound when it's about to break. Halfway through dinner, I rose from my chair and cleared my throat. I like to say something. The room quieted. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. Marissa smiled nervously. "Oh, this sounds serious," she joked, but her voice wavered. "It is," I said. I reached for the remote on the table and turned toward the television mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life. Cole's footage appeared. The Birchwood Hotel sign, time-stamped photos, and then, one by one, the sisters walking into separate rooms with their lovers. Gasps cut through the air. Marissa's face drained of color. Elena's fork clattered to the floor. Paige covered her mouth, eyes wide. The laughter in the video echoed through the room. Marissa's voice, unmistakable, filled the silence. "They'll never suspect. It's just our little game." Her father, Harold, stood up, trembling. "Marissa, tell me this isn't you." She couldn't speak. The room was still except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Grace and Haley sat frozen, confusion and betrayal painted across their faces. I looked at Marissa. "For 20 years, I believed in you. In us. And while I was building a life, you were building lies." My voice was steady, almost too calm. "I don't need explanations. I just needed the truth to be seen." Elena's husband, Robert, slammed his fist on the table. "How could you? All of you," Paige's husband shouted. "Was this your idea, Marissa?" The chaos began, yelling, sobbing, accusations flying like shards of glass. Marissa tried to reach for me, whispering, "James, please, not like this." I stepped back. There's no other way. Lies end in light. The rest of the evening blurred into noise. People storming out, Harold clutching his chest in disbelief, the sisters crying in separate corners of the room. I stood in the middle, detached from the wreckage, watching the world I knew collapse into silence. When it was over, I turned to Marissa, who stood trembling by the door. "Leave," I said softly. "Tonight." James, I have nowhere. That's not my problem anymore. Her suitcase thudded down the stairs an hour later. I didn't watch her go. The sound of the door closing was enough. At midnight, I sat alone at the dining table surrounded by half-empty glasses and cold food. The air smelled of perfume, wine, and betrayal. The house, once full of laughter, was hollow. But beneath the silence, there was peace, the first real peace I'd felt in months. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, raised it toward the empty chairs, and whispered to the truth. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and endless, covering everything that had broken. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to stop it. The next morning, the house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. I woke up before sunrise, sat by the kitchen window, and watched the snow bury the driveway. The world outside looked clean, untouched. Inside, everything reeked of aftermath, stale wine, burnt candles, and the faint scent of her perfume that still lingered in the air. Grace came downstairs first, wearing her oversized college sweatshirt. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say a word as she poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. For a while, we just sat there, two people bound by the same wound. Finally, she whispered, "Is it true, Dad?" I looked at her, my throat tightening. "Yes, it's true." She nodded slowly, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. "Then I don't want to see her again." Haley came down moments later, her steps heavy, her face cold. "She called me last night," she said, voice trembling. I didn't answer. "Good," I replied quietly. I hated saying it, but I couldn't bring myself to lie anymore. By afternoon, word had spread through Maple Ridge. Small towns have a way of amplifying secrets, turning whispers into wildfire. Neighbors avoided eye contact. Friends sent awkward texts, some sympathetic, others curious. The Whitmore sisters had become the talk of the town. The perfect facade was gone. I spent the next few days in practical silence, signing papers, answering calls from lawyers, and trying to function. When the phone rang that Thursday afternoon, I almost didn't pick up, but the voice on the other end wasn't what I expected. "Mr. Mason? This is Diana Reed," she said. "Cole referred me to handle your case." Diana's tone was calm but firm, a woman who understood both precision and pain. "We'll make sure everything is handled properly," she assured me. "The evidence you have will make the proceedings straightforward." "Straightforward?" I repeated, almost laughing. "Nothing about this feels straightforward." "I know," she replied softly, "but we'll end cleanly. And that's something." That night, I opened the folder again. The photos, the timestamps, the videos, every piece of proof that had torn my life apart. I studied them not to relive the pain, but to make peace with it. I had spent 20 years building trust. Now I was building distance. Then came the call that broke me in a different way. It was Harold, Marissa's father. His voice, usually commanding, was fragile. "James," he began, "I don't know what to say. I raised them to be better than this." "I know you did," I answered. "I need you to understand something," he said, his tone breaking. "You were the best thing that ever happened to this family. If I could take back what they did, I would. But I can't. All I can do is tell you, you're still my son, no matter what happens." For the first time since that night, I felt something soften inside me. "Thank you, Harold," I said quietly. "That means more than you know." After we hung up, I sat in the dark living room, surrounded by the ghosts of laughter that used to fill this place. I could almost hear Marissa humming in the kitchen, the sound of her bracelets clinking as she reached for the sugar jar. Memory is cruel like that. It keeps replaying scenes from a movie you no longer want to watch. The next day, the manager from the Birchwood Hotel called. His voice was polite but uneasy. "Mr. Mason, I'm sorry to bother you, but your wife and her sisters are currently staying here. It seems they've been unable to settle their bill." I closed my eyes, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "How much?" He hesitated. 3 nights. Altogether, about $1,200. "I'll pay it," I said, surprising even myself. "Are you sure?" he asked. "They didn't." "I'm sure." I cut him off. "Just send me the invoice." I didn't do it out of pity. It wasn't love either. It was closure. The final thread to cut. That night, I transferred the payment and deleted the hotel's number from my phone. I poured myself another drink, looked around the empty house, and realized I no longer wanted to live there. Too many echoes. Too many ghosts. 2 weeks later, the house went up for sale. The realtor asked if I wanted to stage it for viewing. No, I said. Let's stand as it is. Let them see the truth of what's left behind. When a moving truck finally pulled away, I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, watching the windows fade in the distance. 20 years of memories, boxed and gone. I moved into a small apartment in downtown Minneapolis. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, the silence different. Not haunting anymore, but peaceful. Grace visited often, Haley less so. They were healing in their own way, and I didn't push them. Some nights, I still woke up thinking I heard Marissa's laughter, only to remember it was just the wind outside. I used to think forgiveness was something you gave others. But now I was learning. Sometimes it's something you give yourself, one quiet night at a time. 6 months passed before I saw her again. By then, the city had softened the edges of my pain. The rhythm of downtown Minneapolis became my therapy. The hum of traffic, the chatter of strangers, the sharp winter air that kept me awake. I worked, I read, I cooked for one. My life became quiet, deliberate, and clean. The chaos was behind me. Or so I thought. That evening, I stopped by Cedar and Stone, a restaurant I used to visit for client dinners. It was one of those places where jazz played low, and every glass of bourbon felt like a confession. I sat at the bar, scrolling through market updates, when I heard a voice, soft, broken, but unmistakable. James! It was her. Marissa stood a few feet away, wearing a gray coat and holding a worn leather purse. Her hair was shorter, darker, her skin pale. The confidence she once wore like perfume was gone. She looked smaller. For a long second, I couldn't speak. Memories collided. Her laughter, her betrayal, that red dress on the night, everything fell apart. She forced a smile that trembled. I didn't think I'd ever see you again. I nodded once. Neither did I. She hesitated before taking the stool beside me. The air between us felt heavy, almost solid. You look good, she said. I've been fine, I answered. My tone was even, but my pulse was loud in my ears. Marissa sighed, fingers trembling as she lifted her glass of water. I heard you sold the house. I did. And the girls? They're doing well. They don't want to talk to you. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded as if she expected it. I deserve that. I didn't respond. I just let the silence hang there, because there was nothing left to say that could fix what she'd done. Finally, she whispered, James, I've lost everything. The business failed. The house is gone. Elena moved away. Paige's husband filed for divorce, and I can barely afford rent. I've been trying to start over, but I can't. I don't know how. Her words were soft, stripped of pretense, but they didn't move me the way they might have before. I had already buried my empathy for her months ago in the snow outside our old house. Do you want money? I asked quietly. She shook her head quickly. No, I'm not here for that. I wanted you to know that I regret everything. I wake up every day wishing I could go back. You didn't deserve what I did to you. For a moment, I studied her face, the face of the woman I once loved, now marked by regret and consequence. There is no beauty left in it for me, only memory. Do you remember what I told you the night you left? I asked. Her voice broke. You said, lies end in light. I nodded slowly, and they did. She looked down, her tears falling silently onto her trembling hands. James, please. I've lost everything. I finished my drink, set the glass down, and looked straight into her eyes. You didn't lose, I said evenly. You just harvested what you planted. Her breath caught. For a moment, I saw the flicker of the woman she used to be, proud, defiant, full of words. But now there were none left. I stood, pulled a few bills from my wallet, and placed them on the counter. Take care, Marissa. She reached out as if to stop me, but I stepped back. Don't, I said quietly. There's nothing left to say. As I walked out, the door's bell chimed faintly behind me, and the winter wind rushed in, sharp, cold, clean. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Outside, the streets were slick with melting snow. The city lights reflected off puddles like fragments of another life. I walked without direction, just breathing in the cold air that bit at my skin. It was painful, but it felt real. When I reached the bridge over the Mississippi, I leaned against the railing and watched the water move beneath the ice. It carried everything away: time, pain, memory. I realized then that what I felt wasn't anger anymore. It was distance, the kind that comes when the wound finally closes, even if the scar remains. That night, as I returned to my apartment, I caught my reflection in the elevator mirror. Older, yes, but also lighter. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on the balcony overlooking the quiet city. I thought of Marissa, of what she'd said, of everything she'd lost. And for the first time, I didn't feel hatred or pity, only acceptance. Because some endings aren't about revenge or forgiveness. They're about release. A full year had passed since that night at Cedar and Stone, and life had found a new, quieter rhythm. The sharp edges of the past had dulled, replaced by a kind of stillness I hadn't known before. I had stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped checking old messages, stopped wondering where everything went wrong. I simply lived one breath, one morning, one evening at a time. I had transferred to a new division at the firm, one that allowed me to work remotely most days. My apartment, overlooking Lake Michigan, became both my office and my refuge. I liked the way the morning light poured through the windows, cutting across the desk where I spread my papers. I liked the way the city hummed below, alive, but far enough away that I could listen to it without being swallowed by it. Some nights, I would cook dinner for my daughters. Grace was thriving at university, and Haley was preparing for her senior year of high school. They were still cautious around the subject of their mother, but the silence had grown less sharp, less bitter. Healing, I had learned, doesn't come with noise, it comes with patience. It was during one of those evenings after the girls had gone home that my neighbor, an elderly man named Walter, joined me on the balcony. He was a retired history teacher who often spoke in metaphors, always holding a glass of bourbon like it was an extension of his hand. "You've been quiet lately," he said. "I've been free lately," I replied, half smiling. He chuckled, his eyes glinting with the kind of wisdom that only comes with years. "Freedom isn't quiet, son. It just sounds different once you've earned it." His words stuck with me long after he went inside. Because he was right. My silence wasn't emptiness anymore. It was peace. The kind you only find after losing everything that once defined you. That night, as I watched the lights flicker over the lake, I thought about the story that had followed me through Maple Ridge, the Whitmore sisters' pact, they called it. People spoke of it like a local legend, a cautionary tale whispered at dinner tables and coffee shops. They talked about betrayal, about how 3 sisters destroyed 3 families. But beneath all the gossip, there was something else, a kind of strange respect, not for the sisters, but for the man who refused to lose himself to bitterness. I never sought to become that man. I simply chose to survive, to keep my dignity intact when everything else crumbled. And somehow, that choice had become its own kind of redemption. Every so often, I'd hear bits of news about Marissa. Someone said she had moved to Duluth, trying to rebuild her business under a new name. Another claimed she had joined a local church group, living quietly and alone. I never verified any of it. The truth no longer belonged to me. It was hers to carry. One afternoon, I received a letter, unmarked, written in handwriting I knew too well. My instinct was to throw it away, but something made me open it. It was short, just a few lines. "James, I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that someday, when you look back, you remember the parts of us that were good, because they were real once. M." I read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in the drawer of my desk. I didn't respond. Some stories don't need a sequel. That evening, I walked down to the lakeside path. The wind was sharp but clean, cutting through the weight that had lived on my chest for too long. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, and the water caught the light like shards of glass. For years, I had carried the belief that closure meant confrontation, that peace came only when you made someone understand your pain. But standing there, I realized the truth was simpler. Closure isn't something you demand from others. It's something you create for yourself. I leaned on the railing, watching a flock of geese trace the horizon. I thought about the man I was, the husband who believed love could never lie, the father who tried to protect his daughters from heartbreak, the man who once mistook silence for peace. And I thought about who I had become, a man no longer defined by what he'd lost, but by what he'd endured. As the last light of day faded behind the lake, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile, the kind that comes when the pain no longer owns you. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about walking away. It was about learning how not to look back. And under that fading sky, I finally felt it. Not revenge, not forgiveness, but something far greater. Peace.